Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday and happy So What Day. Today is a very special edition of So What because I'm going to be taking you through a new project at Sulky from start to finish, just as if we were hosting one of our live webinars. Now, normally our webinar events, or webcasts, I should call them, are on our education site over at sewingonline.sulky.com. But today we are going to present a webcast right here on So What. So if you've never joined us over at sewingonline.sulky.com for one of our events, we have free webcasts there. We host an event monthly, whether it's a free webcast, a video cast, which is a more in-depth webcast with video instruction. So you can see all of the sewing. You can sew along if you wish, those types of things. We also have longer format sessions, which I'm going to be talking about. One of those we have coming up, which I know a lot of you are already registered for. It is our Creative Rope Baskets embroidery sewing session. I recognize a lot of names coming in and saying hello. Keep them coming. At any rate, this is one of our longer format embroidery sewing sessions, also available over on our education site. We also do special events like our New Year's Eve sew-alongs and things like that. So if you haven't joined us for a special event on our education platform, I highly encourage you to check those out, add things to your personal library. It's a really, really great site where we have lots more capabilities to bring you interactive content, videos, all sorts of things, well above and beyond what we can do here live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. But at any rate, today I'm going to be showing you our brand new witch door hanger. It's a reversible door hanger that we're going to make in the hoop of our embroidery machine. So the witch can either be out or the witch is in. So really cute to display this on your front door, on maybe the door of your sewing studio or your creative space, so people can know, can they come in or not, right? Or are you inside or are you not? Now, I'm not implying that anybody here watching is a witch at all, of course, but we're getting in the spirit of Halloween, and I just think this is so cute. You can also make this as a gift for someone. If you know a teacher or even just your coworkers might appreciate this. I don't know if anybody does this anymore, but maybe you boo your neighbors or boo your coworkers during the Halloween season. What that means is you make them a little treat or a basket or a handmade little gift, and you drop it on their doorstep or at their desk when they're away. Kind of like, leaving a May Day basket type thing. And they don't ever know where it came from, although I'm sure if you gifted this to someone, they might know that it's from you just because it is so crafty and beautiful and showcases your embroidery and sewing talents. So at any rate, we can use this for a lot of things with Halloween coming up. And what I love about this is also we're having a special deal today only. So all of you watching So What are able to grab up this deal. Now, some of you have asked, is there a kit for today? Because normally when we do a live webcast or a video cast or a special event over at sewingonline.sulky.com, we always have a kit available with those events. Well, today, since we're doing it here on Facebook and there's minimal fabric and materials involved that are not thread, we have put together a thread palette for today's project. The thread palette comes with all the embroidery files that you need to create the design. So if you purchase up the thread palette today, here's what it looks like at sulky.com. The special deal is that you will also get a free 1 yard pack of Sulky Stiffy Stabilizer with purchase of the palette. Today only, that is our flash sale during our special live streaming event. So be sure to grab up the palette, because not only do you get the designs and that free 1 yard pack of Stiffy stabilizer with your purchase today, you also get all the threads that you need to create your wall hanging. And that includes 7 spools of Sulky Rayon thread, 2 spools of Sulky Filaine Thread. I'm going to talk about that. This little spider is done in Filaine Thread, which is our 12 weight heavy acrylic thread that brushes up when you brush it with a wire brush. It blooms and it gives it this 3D sort of hairy, furry spider effect. And it's so, so great. It's such a good special effect for your reversible wall hanger. So 2 spools of that. And the reason you get 2 spools is because the small spools of Filaine are 50 yards of thread. Now, you'll probably have enough to do both spiders with 1 spool of Filaine thread, but I will say I was getting close to running out on my second spider for the reversible side. So I wanted to make sure you had 2 spools of that, just in case you wanted to do a test stitch out using the Filaine to make sure that you had all of your machine modifications figured out before you went to sew the final project. I didn't want you to have just enough, and then if you needed to make some extra modifications to accommodate that heavyweight thread, then you wouldn't have enough. So you'll get 2 spools of the Filaine thread in that black color, and you also get a spool of black bobbin thread. I know a lot of us, we stock up on that white bobbin thread because it's so universal for so many embroidery projects, and oftentimes we don't have a spool of black bobbin thread on hand. So we wanted to make sure that you had the right bobbin thread, which is a 60 weight thread. It's a little bit lighter weight than the 40 weight rayon that we're using for the majority of the design. And we also want to use that 60 weight bobbin thread when we switch to the Filaine. So I'm going to talk you through all of that as we work our way through the project. The design is also available as an individual purchase, so you can grab up just the design if you happen to already have black bobbin thread, black Filaine thread, and all the beautiful rayon colors that you need for the project. You can just purchase up that embroidery design. It'll come with the files for the witches in side, the witches out side, and you will be ready to go to create your project in the hoop of your embroidery machine. Now, in addition to all of those threads, we also need some other supplies, of course. So you'll need a fabric for the background, all right? And we're going to cut that already a little bit larger than the finished design size. And then each fabric also gets a rectangle of low loft batting. So it has a little bit of, loft to it, and it really kind of makes it a little bit quilty, all right? That batting is also going to act as an additional sort of stabilizer for the project, and it makes it hang really nice. We don't have any drooping corners. It has nice structure to it. And then we're also, of course, going to use that Stiffy stabilizer for our stabilizer. And this project is done in 2 hoopings. First, we're going to create the witches out. And once that is sewn, we are going to set it aside. Then we're going to create the witches in. And after this stitch is out, we're going to add the back piece to the front piece with right sides facing, and we're going to sew it in the hoop. So we only need to do very minimal hand sewing at the very end. And I also have a hack for that if you hate hand sewing. Now I will say the opening is about this long, maybe 4.5 inches or so is the opening. So not a lot of hand sewing, but again, I have a hack for those of us who hate to do hand work at all. Let's see, we also need our fabric for our hanger. You can also use a piece of ribbon. You can use a piece of flat cording or trim. You could even use a piece of rickrack if you have that in your sewing stash. So the hanger is really, up to you, but I'm going to show you how to create a fabric hanger if that's the route that you want to go, because that's how I made mine. And that's how the instructions are written as well. I should mention too, when you get your design files, whether you're purchasing the palette shown here or purchasing the design individually, the design files also come with an instructional PDF. The instructional PDF has the color chart mixed in with it. It's the last couple pages of that instructional PDF. So you will get step-by-step instructions with full color photos to guide you through the in the hoop process. And then you will also get the color charts. It's very important to follow those color charts, because when you get to the part of the stitch out that's done in Filaine, your machine may not recognize Filaine as a color or a thread type, because Filaine is a relatively newer thread that some machine brands, they just don't know about. So they don't have it programmed into their machines, especially if you have an older sewing machine. It's definitely not going to recognize Filaine. And we get this problem as well sometimes when we come out with newer thread colors, even if they're Rayon or Poly Deco, the machine brands oftentimes won't recognize those because it requires so many updates to their software, and then it requires that you update your machine to the latest software if you have those capabilities. So a lot of the times, if those, safeguards or precautions are not being followed, then your machine isn't going to recognize those colors. So something might pop up on your machine that doesn't correlate with the palette or with the colors that you have chosen for the design. So be sure to reference those color charts. You can either print them out or have them on screen, put them on a tablet or what have you to have next to your machine, so that you know which color and which thread type is coming up in the design, so that you don't accidentally just put in, black rayon thread for your spider, and then you miss out on the fun of brushing him out. Also, the spider is also digitized for that heavyweight thread. So the stitches are a little bit longer and they're a little bit farther apart because that thread thickness, right? We don't want the stitches to overlap, things like that. So they're positioned a little bit farther apart when we're working with heavier weight thread. So if you were to use a 40 weight thread for the spider, there's going to be space in between those stitches because 40 weight is so much lighter weight than a 12 weight thread. Is everybody with me? Give me a thumbs up if you're with me. Give me some kind of emoji. Let me know in the comments that you're following along. We haven't started quite yet on the tutorial itself. I'm giving a little bit of time for people to log in today since we are doing a special event. So that's why I'm giving you a little bit broader overview of the project as a whole before we get started. Also, I'm going to be giving away 2 door prizes today. Normally, we give away one special gift to one lucky viewer who is watching, commenting, giving me those emojis, somehow engaging with the post here, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. And we choose one lucky viewer randomly to receive a gift from Sulky as a thank you for watching. Well, today, since we're doing a special event, I'm going to be giving away 2 door prizes, and I will notify you later tonight after everybody has had a chance to watch and comment and all of those good things. And today I'm going to be giving away the Witches In or Out Machine Embroidery Collection. Oh, I'm not ready with my applause. Here we go. All right. And you will know it's me, and you will know it's not a bot because I do something special when I notify you, just so that you know, so we cut out on all of those spammers. All right, so just to reiterate, if you purchase the Witches In or Out machine embroidery design only without the thread, that does not come with our special deal today. You have to purchase up that palette, and then you will get a 1 yard pack of Sulky Stiffy Stabilizer absolutely free with purchase of the palette. So you'll have the stabilizer you need, the thread that you need, the designs that you need, and then you just need to dive into your fabric stash, grab up some batting remnants, and you'll be good to go to create your project. A couple of other things that you might find handy that you're going to see me use throughout the demo today. Some Sulky KK2000. Since we're doing an in the hoop project and we need to secure different layers of fabrics in the hoop, you really want some temporary spray adhesive so that your fabrics don't shift when you place them on the stabilizer. So this is really, really great for that. This is a temporary spray adhesive. It's air soluble. So after about 48 to 72 hours, it's going to just dissipate into the air and you'll be good to go. Let's see. I thought about something else while we were talking. Oh, another thing about the design, before I get into some more helpful products, another thing about the design is that the witch's skirt that you see here, that is an applique that again is done in the hoop while we're doing the rest of the wall hanger. So I like to use a little bit of Sulky Perfect Applique Fusible Web. Even though we are securing our applique in the hoop of our embroidery machine, I'm going to show you why I like to use fusible web for that and how it improves the overall stitch out quality of the applique. So all you need is a little scrap of Perfect Applique Fusible Web and a little scrap of accent fabric. So I went with a pretty purple that I had on hand. I mean, you really only need, all this is in the instructions, but you really only need like a 2-inch by maybe 5-inch piece of fabric for both sides. So not a lot. You can dive into your stash, look for those little bits that you can't part with because this is a really great use for them. You could also give your witch a different skirt on one side than the other. So there's no rules that say that that applique fabric has to match. So you can really have fun with it. All right, so KK2000, Perfect Applique Fusible Web. I also highly suggest you grab up some Sulky Clear Embroidery Tape. This is going to help us while we're working our way through adding those layers in the hoop of our embroidery machine. The Sulky Clear Embroidery Tape is reusable. Again, it's clear so you can see through it. Sometimes if we use, painter's tape or masking tape, first off, it doesn't have a great hold. When you put your hoop onto the machine, sometimes that tape will get caught on the foot and start rolling away from you. This doesn't do that. It also cleans or tears very cleanly along any stitching lines. So if you place your tape and it gets sewn over, you can simply tear it away really cleanly and nicely along the stitching line. So you don't have to worry about, only placing your tape along that outer edge and, it getting caught in any of your beautiful thread work. The other thing is if you want smaller strips of the tape, see how it tears so nicely. If you want smaller pieces, you can simply just tear them in half and super accurate, tears really nicely. Again, reusable probably 4 or 5 times, depending on the fabric that you use. Sometimes if I'm using this on felty, it'll get a little bit linty over time. And, obviously you don't want to reuse something that gets linty or gunky like that. Here is one I used on felty. I still have it next to me in case it still has some stickiness but you can see it's getting a little gunky. So probably time for me to grab a new piece. All right, so in addition to KK2000, perfect applique, the Sulky clear embroidery tape, you will also want to grab up a Filaine wire brush. This is what we're going to use to fluff up our spider, and I'll show you how that works. I'm showing kind of right now, but this wire brush, the bristles are really compact, and it's specially made for the Filaine thread. So it doesn't, catch on thread loops. You still need to be pretty careful with it, but you can brush out this guy as much or as little as possible to create the cool 3D fur effect that you'll have on your little spider. So in addition to this, you might also want some curved tipped squeezers. I'm always talking about these guys. Where is it? Oh, it's right behind me because I have a different project in progress behind me. But these are the curved tip squeezers. This is what I like to use to clip jump threads throughout the stitch out, because the curved tip doesn't nick anything when you go to clip things off while your fabric is hooped. And I'm sure I'll come up with some other products as we move along. Wonder clips. This is going to help us close our opening because it's a little bit bulky, so we want to clip it in place rather than try to use pins. And then for needles, we're going to need 2 different needles for the stitch out. And for the main part of the stitch out for the Rayon thread, you can use a 7511 embroidery needle. You could probably also get away with an 8012 top stitch, but I'm recommending a 7511 embroidery needle. When we get to the Filaine thread, you need to go up in needle size because of the thickness of that thread. So we're going to move up to a 116, and you can use a universal needle here. A universal needle has a little bit of a ball point, just like an embroidery needle. And for the Filaine thread, a universal needle will work okay. It's a 116 size, and it's a big needle because of the thickness of that Filaine thread. And it's going to be fine going through our quilting cotton fabric because it's backed with batting and also has the Stiffy stabilizer attached to it. So you don't have to worry about creating too large of a hole in your fabric, because it's going to be just big enough for that heavyweight thread to penetrate through those layers. All right, so I might be missing some things here and there for our supply list, but we will get to them as we work our way through. Also, when you go to grab up your palette today, as I mentioned, today only, you will get a 1-yard pack of Sulky Stiffy stabilizer included with purchase. There's also some optional add-ons right there on the palette page. So if you want to grab up the needles, or you want to grab up the wire brush, or you want to grab up that perfect applique, you can really easily add those to your purchase right there on the page where the palette lives. If you're looking for all of the links for the things I'm talking about today, they are conveniently located in the description of today's post. So you'll want to click on that little See More button that's right there at the bottom of the screen, and the whole description will pop out. It'll show you featured products for today, and you'll be able to easily click on over to the palette and see all of those optional add-ons as well. All right, so shall we get sewing? Let's do it. I just want to make sure I have addressed all of the comments and questions so far, so we don't get too in the weeds when we stop for a Q&A break. Let's see. Carla is asking, will auto threaders work with that size needle? So it works for me to use my auto threader when I'm working with the Filaine thread. If your needle is large enough to accommodate the thread, the auto needle threader is going to work. The only reason it wouldn't work is if you still have that 7511 needle in there and you go to thread it with a thicker thread, a thread that's too thick for that needle, your auto threader is going to try to punch that thread through that tiny needle eye, and it's not going to work. So make sure that you have that large needle eye so that you don't have problems with the auto threader. All right. Let's see. Are all the items in the pack that you're offering? So with the thread palette, you will get the threads I mentioned, which are 7 spools of Sulky Rayon, 2 spools of Sulky Filaine, and 1 spool of Sulky Bobbin Thread. And you will also get all the design files included with your purchase. But everything else I mentioned, those are add-on purchases that are available for you to look at and shop around when you get to that page where the palette is. All right, so I think I am all caught up, but again, I want to make sure that you are putting your questions and comments in the live chat, and make sure that you are commenting, sharing the post, engaging with me here today, because as long as you do so, you will be eligible to be the winner of the machine embroidery design. And I'm going to give out 2 of those today to 2 lucky viewers who are engaging with the post. Sharon says, I have a multi-needle machine. Can you use a 14 needle with Filaine? If you need a bigger needle, the machine would have to be retimed. All right, so Sharon, I have to admit, I'm not an expert on multi-needle machines. So you can either send your question to info@sulky.com so we can do a little research and get back to you. Or we will try to comment on that question as we get a little further down in today's tutorial, because thankfully I do have the excellent, wonderful Sulky customer care team watching and helping out today as well. So they may have that answer for you, but I apologize. I'm not a multi-needle person. I just don't have one. And I've only used one twice in my entire career. Something is wrong with that, right? So I'll get the answer to that question though. All right, let's see. All right, so let's get started. Oh, someone's saying, can I buy the special palette anytime today? So you can. Today is our flash sale day. So as long as you are purchasing up the palette today, you will get the 1 yard pack of Sulky Stiffy added to your purchase. I will say we have a limited quantity of the palettes right now. So make sure that if you are interested, you grab that up before, we have to restock those guys. But we tried to have enough on hand for today's event. All right, so let's get started. The first thing that we need to do before we even load the design into our machine is make that strap, because we're actually going to make the strap using our regular sewing machine. So if you are going to swap the fabric strap for a piece of ribbon or a piece of rickrack or trim, then you don't need to bother with creating a fabric strap. But if you want to create a strap out of fabric, then you're going to follow these instructions before placing your embroidery module onto the machine. So first off, we're going to take our fabric strip for the hanger and we're going to fold it in half lengthwise and give it a good press. Now I'm using a Clover hot ruler to fold and press my fabric strip. And if you've never used a Clover hot ruler before, they are such great time savers, especially when you're working with a fairly narrow fabric strip and you want your edges to be nice and accurate and that folded edge to be nice and straight. So a hot ruler is a very, very thin ruler that's made out of a heat-tolerant material. So you can fold your fabric around it and press right over it. So it's really great for making things like pockets, for hemming certain things, and for making these narrow straps. So you can see I'm folding it in half, pressing it all the way lengthwise. And then we're going to unfold and fold those long edges to meet along the center fold line that we just created. So you will do that along the entire length of the strap. And then we're going to refold it along that first fold line, and that's going to enclose all of our raw edges. So now we have a really narrow fabric strap, or strip rather, that is kind of mimicking a ribbon, right? It is ending up at about 3/8 of an inch wide. So just under a 1/2 inch is the width of our strap. And you can certainly make this a little bit wider, maybe up to 5/8 of an inch. But I wouldn't go any wider than that, because when we are adding our fabric strip or fabric strap, hanger, whatever you want to call it, ribbon, etc., we have a couple of placement markings and sort of basting stitches that our machine is going to do for us once we're in embroidery mode. And we want to make sure that those stitches go just beyond our hanger width. So for example, if you made a fabric strip that was 1 inch wide and our stitches only go, 5/8 of an inch, then we're going to have little bits of our hanger that are not secured by those stitches. So that's the point I'm trying to get here. If you're going to use ribbon, I'd go with 3/8 of an inch wide to maybe a 1/2 inch. Again, rickrack trims would work, things like that. All right, so once we have our hanging strip prepped and ironed, then we are just simply going to stitch along both long ends. And now we have our finished hanging strip. You can set that aside. And now we are going to go into embroidery mode. So you're going to place your embroidery module onto the machine. You're going to load your design into the machine and select the hoop that works for your design. Now, in order to use the hoops that I have, which I believe I used a 260 by 200 hoop for mine, I had to rotate my design so that it's vertical rather than horizontal. It's going to come into your machine as a horizontal design. So if you have a hoop that's large enough for you to, stitch it out this way, that's fine. But just know you can rotate your design 90 degrees and then you will be able to fit it in more hoop sizes or more traditional hoop sizes. All right. So once we have figured out how our design is fitting in our hoop, oh, I should mention, our first stitch out is going to be the witches out design. So that's the first one we're going to sew out. So you'll load both designs, but only place the witches out onto your machine screen right now. As I mentioned, this is done in 2 hoopings. So our first hooping is the witches out. All right. Now we are going to hoop our stabilizer. And I did this 2 ways to show you that this can be done in a magnetic hoop or this can be done in a standard hoop. If you don't yet have a magnetic hoop, we have these available at sulky.com, and they are game changers for so many machine embroidery projects. Things that were once unhoopable can now be hooped in a magnetic hoop because it's just 2 magnets that come together to hold your fabric, stabilizer, all those good things while you are doing machine embroidery. But whether you're using a magnetic hoop or a standard hoop, we are only going to hoop our stabilizer first. So this is a rectangle of Sulky Stiffy stabilizer in the hoop. And now we are going to do color stop 1. color stop 1 is the placement stitch for our first fabric sandwich. You can see behind the KK2000 and fabric that I'm showing here, you can see a little hint of stitching on the stabilizer that is in the hoop. Those are the placement stitches. So it's basically your rectangle outline for your design. It's showing you where to place the fabric and batting so that it's centered on the placement stitches and you maximize your fabric this way. You have less waste, right? So we have our placement stitches sewn out on the stabilizer. And now we're going to place our fabric and batting for the background of the Witches Out design. So we have our background fabric. I went with a solid gray that I had in my stash. You could use a bit of a print, but I would go with like a blender so that it doesn't compete with the design. You don't want to choose a fabric that has a ton of motifs on it and all that, because all this is going to get lost, you know? All of these little stars and everything, that's all thread. So we really want to be able to see all of that. So your best bet is to go with a solid fabric, or you can go with a blender that has a very subtle, nondescript background. So you'll take your fabric and you will attach your first batting rectangle to the fabric wrong side using your Sulky KK2000. Then we're going to place some more Sulky KK2000 on the batting, and then you're going to center that right over the top of your placement stitches. All right, is everybody with me? Okay. So now that we have all of this secured in the hoop, I also used a little bit of the Sulky clear embroidery tape just along the upper and lower edges of my fabric. This is just to make sure it's really not going to go anywhere during my embroidery. Now, it's also going to stitch out a tacking stitch for your fabric. So you will also have that sort of safeguard that's basting that fabric in place as well. All right, but you could see I have a little bit of the clear embroidery tape on the top and bottom. You can add it to the sides as well if you so choose. And you're going to place your hoop back onto the embroidery machine. The first thing that's going to sew out is the placement stitch for our applique fabric, which is our little witch's skirt. Okay, so we want to prep that little fabric rectangle. So I just did it both at the same time for the front, which is either the witches in or out, and the back. So we've got our two applique fabrics prepped with perfect applique fusible web. Now, I mentioned that this is all done in the hoop, so you're going to have tacking stitches that hold your fabric down. But I love to use a little bit of fusible web even when I'm doing applique in the hoop. It does two things. It stabilizes the fabric a little bit better for you. It reduces the fraying that you can sometimes get when you trim your applique fabric in the hoop. And it also helps reduce any show through that you might have on that applique fabric. So let's say you want a light pink witch's skirt and your fabric is black or dark gray print, right? We don't want that fabric to show through our witch's skirt fabric. So by adding a little bit of perfect applique fusible web, we are safeguarding against any show through, eliminating any, fraying that might happen when we trim up our applique in the hoop, and also adding a little bit more stability for the applique fabric. So once you have prepped your applique fabric, which just means fusing the fusible web to the wrong side of the fabric, Then we're going to peel away that paper backing, and we are going to place it over the witch skirt placement stitches. So I have it right over the top of our placement stitches that sewed out in the next step, which I thought I had a picture of that. But right now you can see our tacking stitches for the main background rectangle. And then underneath where I've placed that applique fabric, I've got placement stitches for the skirt. So now I have the fusible side against my background fabric, and I can't fuse it in place yet because then I would have excess fabric beyond my tacking and satin stitch outlines. We don't want that. And I don't like using KK2000 to secure applique fabrics for somewhat of the same reason. Yes, it's air soluble, but it's still going to be tacky for a little while before it dissolves into the air. So instead of using a temporary spray adhesive for the applique fabric, I'm going to go ahead and use the clear embroidery tape to secure my applique fabric in place. And there you have it. I've taped it down, and I can place my hoop back onto the machine, and I can stitch the next color stop, which are the tacking stitches for the skirt applique. So there you have it. I have my skirt applique done. I'm going to remove the tape, and I'm going to use some applique scissors. I've got my favorite duckbill applique scissors somewhere around here. They're never too far away. I like to use these when I'm doing applique in the hoop. They have a really sharp point on them, so I can get into the little corners of the witch's skirt, and then you'll place the duckbill underneath the fabric that you are trimming off. It just gives you a nice accurate cutting line, and you can get really close to those tacking stitches without slicing through them. I do want to say as well, if you accidentally slice through them, the world will not end, because we're still going to have some decorative stitching, and we're going to finish off the applique edges with a lot more thread work. See? So if you happen to slice through your tacking stitches, don't worry, just keep going with the design, because all of that will get covered up. All right. Before we do those satin stitches though, however, here you can see my duckbill applique scissors. I have it all trimmed up now, really nice, close to those tacking stitches. I'm going to remove my hoop. Well, my hoop is probably still removed because I've been doing this trimming. I'm actually going to fuse that fusible web at this point before continuing with the design. And that is going to make sure that my applique fabric stays nice and flat. I have no bubbling, no shifting. If I accidentally snipped through some of the tacking stitches, sometimes you can, get a little bit of fabric fold or something like that during the applique process. To avoid all of that, I'm going to go ahead and fuse this down now without moving anything out of the hoop. So in order to do that, I like to use a little craft iron. I also have a wool pressing mat, which we have both of these items at sulky.com if you don't own these already. I have a little wool pressing mat that I have next to my machine so that when I'm doing in the hoop projects like this that involve a little bit of pressing, that type of thing, I can simply move my hoop off of the machine, place it on the wool pressing mat, use my little craft iron to fuse that applique fabric in place. Then I can place it right back onto my machine. Nothing shifts, nothing moves, and I can continue and move forward with the design. So now we have our skirt attached, and you're going to simply move your way through all of the color stops. You can see right behind my organ needles pack, my design is almost stitched out here. It does take a while. There's a lot of thread changes, but it's really fascinating watching it come together. When you get to your spider stitching, thankfully, it's the last part of the design. You need to swap out your needle. So when you get your color chart, it's going to say this step is Sulky Filaine. All right. When you get to Sulky Filaine, you swap out your needle to the size 116. Thread your needle with the Filaine thread. You're going to slow the machine speed to go as low and slow as possible. I know this is painful for some of us. I get somewhat impatient when I'm putting together an In the Hoop project because it's so fun and exciting and I just want to see it come together. But let me tell you, it's worth it to go all the way as slow as you can go so that your machine can sew this heavyweight thread without problems. We're going to keep that 60 weight bobbin thread in the bobbin and you're going to sew this nice and slow. Watch that spider come together. And then, oh, here I am slowing the machine speed. Now you might not have a button like this on your machine. It might be a more manual function. If you don't know how to slow the machine speed, definitely look that up in your sewing machine manual because all machines are a little bit different. But you definitely want to go as slow as possible. Some machines will have a little turtle and a little rabbit for going slow and fast. So, go to the turtle end of things. All right. Now we have our completed stitch out for one side of our reversible wall hanger. So at this point, we are going to remove this from the machine. You can remove it from the hoop. You can tear away the excess stabilizer beyond your outer perimeter stitching and simply set it aside. That's all we're going to do with it right now. And then we are going to do our second hooping, which is for the witch's in side. So much of the same exact stuff is going to apply as far as the steps, right? We're going to hoop only our Stiffy stabilizer. We're going to do our placement stitch. We're going to do our fabric and batting for the background. But what you really want to make sure that you do is change your needle back to that 7511 embroidery needle for when we are starting our next stitch out. If you forget and you leave that super big needle in there, you're going to create holes that are too large on your wall hanging because we're going to go back to starting with that 40 weight rayon thread. So make sure you have these needles next to you so you can go back and forth as you need throughout the stitch out. It might even be helpful for you to print out your color charts and highlight when you're using that Filaine thread. So you have a visual clue for when to swap your needle. All right, so we're going to go back to 7511 and we're going to go through the whole witch's in stitch out, which is exactly the same as the witch's out, except obviously it says in instead of out. And it also has our two little placement lines for our ribbon or fabric or trim hanger. So after we do our little spider, we're going to switch our needle back to 7511. It's going to sew our placement lines. So now we need to place that fabric hanger that we made well before we started our witch's out stitch out. And we're going to place the ends of the hanger so that they go beyond those placement lines just a little bit. You can go 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch to be on the safe side. Make sure your hanger is not twisted, whether it's ribbon or fabric, and place it so that the majority of it is going toward the stitching. So now we want to use a little bit more of the clear embroidery tape so that our hanger ends don't go anywhere, so that they stay nice and flat. They don't twist up and down during the basting part of the stitch out. And you also want to tape the bulk of the hanger so that it's away from the outer stitching line, so that it stays inside of the hanger nicely. So I just twisted it up a little bit and taped it down. Then you're going to continue along with the stitch out, which is going to sew your hanger ends in place. After you do that, you can remove the tape along the upper edge of your hanger, or you can leave it in place, honestly, as long as it's out of the way of the perimeter stitching line. But leave the loop part of your hanger taped so it doesn't go anywhere. All right, so this is removing that stabilizer from our stitch out that we set aside, the which is out, because now we're going to add that to our which is in stitch out in the hoop. So before I go any farther, I'm going to remember number 27 is where I'm at. I want to address any questions that have come in thus far, because I did see somebody say, "Are you seeing my questions?" So I want to make sure that we address anything that's come in so far. Again, be sure to be posting your comments and questions. Be sure to be giving me those thumbs up or those great emojis, comments, all kinds of things. As long as you do that, you will be automatically eligible to win one of our door prizes today, which is this In the Hoop digital design. Again, the design comes with purchase of our palette. And if you purchase the thread palette today, you will get a 1 yard pack of Sulky Stiffy Stabilizer free with your purchase. Okay. Let's see. A lot of people are saying, questions about using the Filaine thread. People who have never used it, does it make a mess in your machine? So it is quite fuzzy. And I have it on a larger spool here, but you can see like the nubby sort of texture of this thread. Now, I clean my machine rather frequently because I sew a lot. I mean, I know all of you do as well, but I am constantly on my sewing machine and I want to make sure that it performs beautifully. So if you are concerned that this thread is going to, cause any kind of buildup or something in your machine, which I have not had this problem, you want to just be sure to clean your machine after your project is complete. There are a number of ways you can do this. I have seen people or heard of people using a heavyweight thread like a 30-weight thread and putting a little bit of water-based lubricant like Sewer's Aid, which we have at sulky.com. Okay. You can run it along the length of a thread. Then you can pass your thread through the threading mechanism and kind of go either way with it, almost like you're flossing your teeth, but just ever so gently. And then you can pull the thread out and hopefully it will have attached to anything that may have, like lint or what have you that may have come off of the thread. Now, I have not had a problem with this being excessively linty. I will say that embroidering with a heavier weight cotton thread, in my opinion, produces more lint than working with the Filaine thread. So if you embroider or do high-speed quilting with, let's say, a 30-weight cotton or 12-weight cotton thread, even with the best quality thread, you could have a little bit of lint happen. You want to always make sure to clean your bobbin case regularly. Even though we're not using Filaine in the bobbin, we just want to make sure that everything is nice and clean moving forward for our next project. So I hope that clears your mind a little bit about working with the Filaine thread because it's so worth it. It's really, really cool. You can create such great effects with it. Okay, let's see. Changing. Oh, with limited closet space, I love the reversible idea. Excellent. Love it. Coral says this would look great with glow in the dark threads as well. It really, really would. You can use the Sulky Glowy thread palette. It comes in a 6-pack, and you can kind of mix and match some of the threads in the design, and that would be super cool. It would also look really good in our neon thread variety. So love that. All right. Is changing the speed in the directions. It is, Sandy. So again, when you get your design files, it'll come with an instructional PDF. It'll tell you everything I'm going through with you right now today in those instructions. It'll probably even be more thorough because when I'm live streaming, sometimes I forget some details. So definitely refer to that instructional PDF. It'll say, you know, at this point, change the speed. Here's what you want to do when working with Filaine, change your needle, etc. So yes, it is in the instructions. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Sorry, it's hard to go through all of the comments, but I love them. Keep them coming. Kathy says, do you have the duckbill applique scissors for sale? We do sell the duckbill applique scissors at sulky.com. We do. We also sell the little curved tip squeezers that I use to trim up jump threads when I'm doing machine embroidery as well, so you can find those. Donna says, can we purchase that tape today? Yes. The Sulky Clear Embroidery Tape is also at sulky.com. You get 2 rolls of tape with your purchase, which is so amazing because you're going to love working with it and you'll have a backup for when you run out. All right. Barb says, I think adding fusible web when doing in the hoop applique also makes the trimming easier. It definitely does because it has that, you know, it adds to sort of the thread count of your fabric and it gives you that stability for trimming it away as well. So great idea. All right. Gail says it's not going to tack down the background fabric. It does tack down the background fabric. I might have just missed that when I was talking about the stitching steps. But yes, there are tacking stitches as well. All right. I hope you have lots of the spider thread. I'm going to need more. We do. We have a whole line of Filaine thread. It comes in larger spools and smaller 50-yard spools. And we have lots of machine embroidery designs that feature the Filaine thread as well. We have our Peekaboo Pets design collection. We have a design collection called Pollen, which has a bunch of beautiful flowers done in rayon. And then the little bits of, you know, where the pollen would be on the flowers, those are done in Filaine. So you can brush that out and they make this really cool effect. All right. How is the sewer's aid applied to the spool? Oh, for cleaning your machine. So you would just put a little dab of sewer's aid on your finger. And this is water-based again, so it's not going to put any sort of oily residue anywhere. And then just take a bit of thread and you're going to throw this out and run it along the thread, just like so. So it kind of coats the thread a little bit. Then you can thread your machine through the whole threading mechanism. You can bypass the needle and then just do a little bit of floss, you know, in your machine, and then pull the thread out so that it runs through the mechanism, and any sort of lint or bits or fibers should come off on that sewer's aid. That's just something that I learned actually from Eric Drexler, who has been with Sulky since the beginning. He is a sewing machine technician, and that's just one trick that I learned by asking him. And he has lots of other tricks as well. We actually did a So What Live with Eric, and he gave lots and lots of tips for sewing machine maintenance. You can find that on our YouTube channel as well. But that's a way to kind of see, if you've got lint or thread buildup in your actual, thread path of the machine, that should take care of at least some of it, if not all of it. All right. Okay, so let's move on. I believe I said number 27 we were at. So now we're going to add our Witches Out project, or, stitch out, to our Witches In stitch out, which is still in the hoop. We haven't moved anything, but we have removed the hoop from the machine. Now, I'm showing you two different colors here. You could see the green line of stitching, and you can see the black line of stitching. You might have done both of these in black, okay? But I chose two different colors so that you can see them coming together. So for our Witches In stitch out, which is in the hoop, it's got our hanger, our fabric or ribbon hanger attached and taped down. That has the green perimeter stitching. Our Witches Out stitch out has black perimeter stitching. We're going to match those up, placing them right sides together. So again, do not take your Witches In hooping out of the hoop. Simply put your Witches Out hooping over the top. Make sure it is oriented properly so that it's not upside down. So Witches Out is facing Witches In, and you're going to line up your perimeter stitching. Now, don't freak out if you can't line this up perfectly. Just do it to the best of your ability. Double check your corners by just lifting them up a little. When you get a corner aligned, put some embroidery tape. Then go and align the next corner, put some embroidery tape. Just do your very best. Because when we do our final stitching line, which is going to secure our two sides, it's going to stitch just inside of the perimeter stitching line. So if it's not matched up absolutely perfectly, no one's ever going to see it. No one's ever going to know, because our final stitching is going to be just inside of that line. All right. Once we have that and we've taped it all down, you're going to stitch that last stitching step. So see how that perimeter stitching line is just inside of the previous line? It also has an opening along the lower edge. So there's some back stitches and then our final stitching line, which also secures our hanger ends in the stitching, and secures both our front and back of the wall hanger. So now that that is complete, we can take it out of the hoop finally. And we're going to tear away the Stiffy stabilizer beyond the stitching. So we've already torn it away from our Witches Out, right? Now we're going to tear it away from our Witches In. So I want to reiterate that this is pretty bulky at this point. We've got 2 layers of cotton fabric, 2 layers of low loft batting. That's why you want to go with low loft. 2 layers of Stiffy stabilizer. And then we've got all that thread work as well to contend with. But don't worry, everybody can do this. So you're going to tear this away from our stitching line, and then we're going to trim it up. So I got rather close to our original perimeter stitching line, about 1/8 of an inch or so away from that. I also left my opening seam allowance a little bit wider than the rest that I trimmed. That's just going to allow me to tuck in those raw edges nicely and make sure it's nice and flat. If you get too narrow with that, it becomes really hard to hand sew or stick together our opening edges. Along with this, we want to make sure to clip our corners a little bit. It's ever so slight, but it really allows us to have nice, crisp corners when we turn this right side out. So trim up your seam allowances because we need to reduce that bulk. Trim up our corners, leaving the opening seam allowance a little bit wider. And then we're going to carefully turn this right side out. If you happen to have a turning tool, I have various turning tools that I use. Sometimes I will use the end of this watercolor paintbrush because it's nice and blunt. If I need a more narrow corner, I use a nifty turning tool such as this. I can get in and poke out those corners. I also like to run this along my seams, making sure that those are nice and crisp. You can also give this a little bit of a press once you have turned your opening into the wrong side. So I also happen to love that you can still see that original placement line along our opening seam allowance, because when we turn it to the wrong side, we want that stitch to be just inside of, our seam allowance line. So if you hate hand sewing, here's what you can do. You can place a little piece of 1/8 inch wide double-sided basting tape right inside of that seam allowance, just inside of that black stitching line that you can see. You'll put it on both sides and then turn it to the wrong side and stick them down. That double-sided basting tape is like a semi-permanent craft tape. It's really nice and strong, and you won't need to hand sew it at all. I know our friends at Parker on the Porch like to do that hack a lot because our friend Jen over there does not like to do any hand sewing. So I actually learned that hack from her. But if you would like, you can simply hand sew your opening closed. I like to use Clover Wonder Clips to get that edge nice and flat and where I want it. You can press along that edge as well. As I mentioned, I would press from both sides and then Wonder Clip it so that it stays together. And then you can simply hand sew along your Wonder Clips, removing them as you get to them. I just do a whip stitch or a ladder stitch or a slip stitch, whatever invisible stitch you prefer. Again, it's not a very long seam, but you can get it really accurate. You can also use that double-sided basting tape to secure it and then do some additional hand sewing as well, just for some extra security. So once you have that all sewn up, it's time to have fun with our Filaine thread. I wait till the very end to do this. It's kind of like, the cherry on the sundae of the project, and it's really fun. So you take your Filaine wire brush and start brushing along your spider body and those spider legs. You can brush it as much or as little as you want. Do you see it puffing up off of the surface? It's kind of hard to see. There, you could kind of see how hairy my spider is getting. And you can start by brushing all in one direction and then brush in the opposite direction. And then sometimes I even just kind of, almost like I'm scrubbing a plate a little bit and lifting it up to kind of give it that dimension. And there you have it. You can't even see the stitching lines anymore where they sort of are offset a little bit. It just becomes a furry spider because all of those little hairs or, fibers are now like meshed into one faux fur thread effect. I could do it all day. It's really fun. All right. So you want to make sure to fluff up both sides, of course, so you have your 3D spider popping off of the surface. And there you have it. You've got the witches in on one side, and then you carefully flip her over. Oh, the action shots. And then the witch is out. So all you have to do is remember to flip that as you are leaving throughout the day or leaving the room that you're in. And it's super, super cute. Just some other ideas for ways to use this. I was thinking before you hand sew it closed, you could stuff it with a little bit of fiber fill and have a little bit of a hanging pillow. That would look really cute on a doorknob or even just hanging on the wall and give it just even more sort of puffiness and, you know, textural interest to it. You could also omit the ties and not even do that part of the stitch out and stuff it and have a little shelf sitter pillow that you don't even hang up. So lots of different ways you can really make this project your own. All right, I'm going to see if we've got some more questions that have come in. Bernie says, do all the threads come with the kit? So all of the threads come with the palette. This is what the palette looks like at sulky.com. The palette comes with the embroidery design files as well. So you'll get 7 spools of Sulky Rayon thread, 2 spools of the Sulky Black Filaine thread, and a spool of 60 weight black bobbin thread. Those are all included in the palette, and then with purchase, you also get the designs. If you buy up the palette today, our special flash sale deal is that you will also get a 1-yard pack of Sulky Stiffy stabilizer with purchase of the palette. So a great, great deal, a great sale going on for our special event today. All right. Let's see. I press the seam opening material back before I turn. Makes the opening neater. Great idea. So before you even turn it right side out, you're folding that opening to the wrong side and pressing it. Love it. I love So What because I'm always learning something new from everybody who is watching. Thank you, Eileen, for that great suggestion. All right. Could you sew with a sewing machine? So if you're talking about sewing the opening shut, you could certainly do that on a sewing machine. I would top stitch the entire perimeter of the wall hanging in order to close those opening stitches. However, I just want to show you there is not a lot of room to accommodate that top stitching. So you would need to get really close and do some edge stitching so that you don't run into the cute witch's shoes or any of the stars on the top. So I would just do a really tight edge stitch along the edge. I do want to reiterate though that it's very bulky along this edge because we've got all of those layers, the 2 layers of batting here in that seam allowance, 2 layers of fabric, 2 layers of Stiffy stabilizer. So while you're edge stitching, it's going to be kind of hard to, manage that bulk and make sure that you're sewing an accurate seam. So just take your time with it. I'm sure you can do it and it'll be great. All right. Diana says, I use Heat and Bond Ultra for my closing. That's a good point. You know how we used the Sulky Perfect Appliqué fusible web for our witch's skirt? You probably have some left over because you only needed a little rectangle of fusible web. You could cut a strip of that and put it along your opening seam allowance, turn it to the wrong side, and fuse that down before you turn it right side out. Then when you turn it right side out, all you have to do is a quick little whip stitch along that edge, and you'd be good to go. I suppose you could also turn it right side out and do just 1 layer of fusible web, just a little strip, fuse it shut, no hand sewing at all, which is probably what you were meaning. So that's another great idea. Okay, let's see. Upside down would still be a success for me. I make everything crooked. Oh, Jana, I don't think I've ever made a project perfect from start to finish. So I feel you there. But yes, make sure they are in the right direction so that when you turn it right side out, you're not hanging one of your witches out or in designs upside down. Linda's asking what kind of machine do I have? I have a Husqvarna Viking Designer Epic 2. It's a fantastic sewing machine. I also have another Husqvarna Viking regular sewing machine, and I have a small brother machine that only accommodates a 4x4 hoop. And that's just so that I can, kind of give you the best education possible for hoop limitations and basic sewing machines versus the big daddy with all the bells and whistles. Susie Q says you could use a small decorative stitch to close and frame it. That's a great idea. But again, just be mindful of where you're placing those decorative stitches so that they don't run into your beautiful embroidery. So you want to make sure that those are rather narrow decorative stitches that you are using for that option. All right, so a lot of people saying, can I do this on XYZ machine? And as long as you have embroidery capabilities and you have at least is it a 6x10 hoop size, then you can do this project. And is there a link to the Witches in Thread palette? There sure is, Kathy. So if you're not seeing all the links for everything I'm talking about today, you'll need to hit that little See More button. The whole description for today's post will pop out. You'll see featured products. There's a link directly to that thread palette. And then if you just go to that thread palette page, you'll see options for adding on the needles, the embroidery tape, the perfect applique, the KK2000. Like most of the things I'm talking about today will be optional add-ons if you want to have more of a sort of kit for your whole project. And then all you'll need is your fabrics, your batting, and you'll be off to the races. Especially if you buy the palette today, that comes with a 1-yard pack of Sulky Stiffy Stabilizer. The Stiffy Stabilizer really gives you a nice, stability or hand to the fabric so that when you're hanging it, it doesn't warp out of shape over time, right? You don't get any sagging. Your corners stay nice and crisp. So that's why we went with the heavier weight Sulky Stiffy Stabilizer. And that also supports all of this dense stitching that we have going on here. The batting also contributes to that, and it gives it a little bit more of a quilty feel to it as well. So, all right, the method to my madness. Okay, Donna says, is this project downloadable or do you send it out? So if you purchase the palette, you will receive the embroidery designs that you need to create the In the Hoop project, or you can purchase the embroidery designs separately as well. So that's up to you, but it's really great to buy it as a palette because it's almost like getting the designs for free. And then you get 2 spools of Filaine, that bobbin thread that you probably need, and all of the 7 colors that are in the design as well. All right. Anne is loving the hairy spider. I'm telling you, that Filaine thread is so fun and so great for Halloween things. It's great for Santa beards, all kinds of things. You just want to be sure that you're using an embroidery design that is specifically digitized for a heavy or brushed thread. If you try to use a brushed or heavyweight thread like the 12-weight Filaine in a design that is digitized for 40-weight thread, then you're going to have thread breakage. Your thread's going to overlap itself because there is not enough room in the stitching path to accommodate the thickness of the thread. So you want to be sure that your design is specifically digitized for that thick thread so that you can have great success with it. All right. Annette, no, the thread does not glow in the dark, but we do have Sulky Glowy Thread. If you wanted to grab up this palette and then add on a spool or 2 of the Sulky Glowy Thread, you could substitute glowy for, let's say, your spider web or the little yellow stars and dots in the design. And that would be another really cool special effect. I love special effects thread, and Halloween is definitely the time to experiment and use it. So I hope that you all enjoyed today's tutorial and special event here on Sew What. I so appreciate that you're here watching and learning with everyone. Noreen is saying, when we get our thread pack, can we watch this video again? you certainly can. So all of our So What videos are on our YouTube channel. We have a So What playlist. If you like to watch on Facebook, you can also find all of our videos on Facebook. You just have to scroll back in time and find the one that you're looking for. But you can easily get to it on our YouTube channel by going to our So What, our So What, oh my gosh, what's it called? Video grouping. I can't think of the word. Our So What list, and you can find today's episode, which is episode 196. And then you can start from the beginning and watch it over when your palette arrives while you're working your way through that instructional PDF. I cannot emphasize enough to have that PDF in front of you as well as the color chart so you know when to swap out your needle, when to swap out to that Filaine thread, and you will have great success with your cute project. So I can't wait to see all of your witchy wall hangings. Be sure to join our Facebook group, which is called Sulky Stitch and Post pictures of your finished wall hangings there. I can't wait to see all of your fabric choices and your applique fabric choices and everybody hanging them up for the spooky season ahead of us. So thanks again for joining me today. Be sure to sign up for our rope baskets embroidery sewing session over at sewingonline.sulky.com. This is a very extensive sewing session with multiple videos that you can watch and access at any time as long as you are registered for the session. This session will be available September 12th. We still have kits available, but this has a huge demand to it. So I would not wait to order your kit because right now we're on, I think, maybe our third order of kits, and they will be shipping the week of September 15th. So the longer you wait, the longer you're going to have to wait for your kit. And I want to make sure that you all get one because it's at a crazy, awesome deal of only $39.99. So lots to talk about. I know. I appreciate you all being here with me today. Enjoy your project. Have a spooky afternoon, and I'll see you next Tuesday.